So this is one of the types of cards that we got in our kit. Some of them have 12, some of them have 13, some of them have 14, 15, 16, and I think there's one that has 18. Anyways, they'll have a bunch of orange dots on them. And so usually we do this with a marker, but you could do it with counters and push counters on it as well. And so I tell them to circle the twos, circle groups of two. And sometimes that takes some explanation. Sometimes they're not sure what to do. If they get 2 and 5 confused, they might accidentally circle this many. So it shows you different things about them to begin with. Anyway, so we circle groups of 2, and we make sure that none of them are circled twice. So like I can't circle like this, because then that one is in 2 different groups, and everyone has to be in their own group for this. So we circle groups of 2. And then, oh, I have 1 left over. So he's just gonna stay there like that left over. And then I ask them how many groups they have, how many groups of 2 they have. And sometimes they sit there and they count all of the dots, except for the one that's not in a group. And so instead of telling me that they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 groups of 2, they would count to 14, and they would say, oh, I have 14 groups of 2. And so then we would talk about how this is the group and we're not counting the individual circles. Anyway, so I have 7 groups of 2 and 1 more. So then on my whiteboard, I would write 2 7 times with addition in between. Let me just do something. Okay. So I would write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I also have a 1. So I have to make sure that I'm putting the 1 in there. I can put them at the beginning or the end. It doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to say that that equals 15. Because it does. And if I'm not sure how many it equals, I can count all the dots. I could try and do this addition. And then for some of my groups, I talk about how the multiplication symbol, we can just read that as groups of. And so then I can say, okay, well, I have 7 groups of 2. And so then we can write down, I have 7 groups of 2 and 1 more that's left out at the end. And that makes still 15 because I have 15 on my card. Sorry for the really ugly 2. Okay, and then we circle groups of 3. So then we'll erase this. We'll leave this on the board so that we can refer to it afterwards and compare. And not everyone's going to have the same number every time. And so I might have a student who has 12 beside a student who has 15, beside a student who has 13. And so everyone's kind of doing it differently. Sometimes I try to make sure that they all have the same number when we first get started so that it's not confusing for them. But as we progress, we can all have different numbers. Anyway, so we're circling groups of 3 now. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, and now I have none left over. So I had 1 left out of the group when I was doing the 2s, and now I have 0 left out of the group. And how many groups do I have? And a reminder to count the groups and not the individual circles, because they sometimes need reminders for that. And so now I have 5 3s, and so then I can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I have none left over, so then I can just say that equals. And then I say, well, how many does it equal? And often they need to recount the dots again. And sometimes they are surprised to find that it's 15 again, because they don't have conservation of number yet. And then we can talk about how many groups there are, and we know there's 5 groups. There are 5 groups, and so we can say, okay, well, I know I have 5 groups of 3, and how many does that equal again? Well, it made 15, so it will still make 15 again. And so it just says to do that at the bottom here, but we can, the 2s and the 3s, but sometimes we do 4s, sometimes we do 5s, and it's helping them see that numbers are made up of other numbers that are not just 1s, because they a lot of them have this idea in their head that like 5 is just 5 ones and it's not made up of anything else. And so showing that numbers are made up of smaller numbers, and that even these smaller numbers are made up of smaller numbers, which are ones in this case, but anyways. And so, and then we can switch to a different card and erase our board and try again. And so it's noticing that numbers are made up of different numbers. It's noticing that it's always going to equal the same number because you still have the same card. And it's also showing a shorthand way of saying groups of, which is multiplication. But it also, it just gets that in there even if they're not necessarily ready for multiplication yet. It just puts it out there for them. So that's the circling orange dots cards.